Okay, so let's dive into this. We've got quite a stack of sources here, and they're painting a picture of, well, intense action. Lots of kinetic strikes, claims flying back and forth.
Yeah, and maybe more importantly, a real ramp up in the rhetoric, both on the nuclear side and diplomatically. It feels serious.
It does. It feels like we're looking at more than just another flare-up. Maybe a real strategic shift.
I think that's exactly the mission here. We need to understand what these signals mean. It's not just about damage reports anymore. We're seeing confirmation of deep strike capabilities, things that were maybe theoretical before.
And all of this is happening alongside these high-stakes arms control discussions and, frankly, some pretty stark warnings.
Right. The core sources cover the last 24 hours of fighting, these confirmed Ukrainian deep strikes, and then this political storm brewing over potential U.S. missile transfers, like the Tomahawks, and Russia's reaction.
So the big question threading through all this seems to be,
Hmm.
are those old lines, the geographic ones, the rhetorical ones, are they just being ignored now? Tested really aggressively?
Or maybe erased completely. The whole idea of a sanctuary, somewhere safe from attack, seems to be fading fast.
It really does. The speed is noticeable.
Yeah.
All right, let's start with the immediate kinetic stuff because the intensity is undeniable. Ukraine's reporting, what, a pretty grim 24 hours?
Very grim. The official reports list at least 3 people killed, 76 injured across the country. And it's not just missiles, it's the constant drone pressure, too.
They mentioned Shahids, right? How many?
Russia launched 32 Shahid drones, according to the Ukrainian Air Force. They say they intercepted 23, which is, pretty good, but 9 still got through.
And those 9 can still cause significant damage. Where were the fatalities?
Spread out, which tells you something. 2 in the Kharkiv region, Zlatin and Borchova, and 1 more down in Dnipropetrovsk region near Masova. It shows how widespread the threat is.
But the number that really jumped out at me, the sheer scale of it, was from Zaporizhia Oblast.
Oh, yeah, that report was something else. What was it, 696 attacks?
Exactly. 696 attacks launched by Russian forces on 17 different places in just one day. 49 people injured there alone.
I mean, that's not just a barrage. That's overwhelming pressure. Sustained high-volume fire on multiple localities.
And that volume, as you said, it's staggering. Now, let's flip to the Russian side, because there's a symmetry here, isn't there?
There absolutely is. And this is maybe part of that strategic shift. Russia is now reporting the kind of internal pressure, the kind of attacks on its own territory that it's been dishing out.
The governor of Belgorod, Gladkov, his reports seem pretty detailed. What did he claim Ukraine was doing?
His reports state his region got hit hard, over 110 drones, plus more than 50 other munitions, rockets, artillery may be hitting Belgorod Oblast in 24 hours.
And casualties there, too.
Yes, he reported 2 civilian deaths and several injuries, and there was that really specific chilling detail from the attack on Belgorod city itself.
Right, the barotrauma. Tell us about that.
Yeah, 3 people injured in the city attack,
Mm-hmm.
and 1 specifically suffered barotrauma, which is, injury from the pressure wave of an explosion.
That tells you these aren't minor border incidents anymore. The force involved is significant, enough to cause internal injuries just from the blast wave.
Exactly. It makes the strategic shift feel very real, very human. And look, we always have to be conscious with official claims from either side, right? Need independent verification. But the fact that we're seeing such detailed, large-scale reports of attacks inside Russia, mirroring what's happening in Ukraine, that confirms this escalation is real and mutual.
Okay, so that mutual kinetic exchange sets the stage. But the next big piece, maybe the most critical development, is Ukraine confirming its ability to strike deep, moving beyond just defense.
Yes, this is huge. The Ukrainian state openly claimed responsibility for hitting the Electrodetl factory.
In Karachev, Russia.
That's the one. And that single attack, publicly claimed, it basically signals that the idea of a safe zone, a sanctuary deep inside Russia, is over, strategically dead.
Why that factory? What's the significance there?
2 main things. First, location. Karachev is almost 250 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. That's a deep strike.
Okay. And second,
Function. Electrodetl makes electrical connectors, but not just any connectors. These are crucial components for military gear, aircraft, antenna systems, so it's a direct hit on the Russian military-industrial complex far from the front lines.
a 250-kilometer strike requires serious capability. What did they use? Did the sources confirm?
They did. The Ukrainian Navy commander confirmed it was Neptune cruise missiles.
Neptune. Okay, so that's a significant confirmation of their homegrown long-range strike power.
A major confirmation. And it wasn't an isolated incident. The sources point to other deep strikes, too.
Like what?
Well, they also confirmed using HIMARS rockets, the U.S. supplied system, to hit a thermal power plant near Belgorod. That apparently caused pretty big power outages.
HIMARS hitting infrastructure targets deepens that aspect, too.
And then there was a separate claim from the GUR, Ukrainian Military Intelligence. They said they took out a van carrying 4 Russian drone operators inside a military base in occupied Melitopol.
So cruise missiles, precision rockets, special operations targeting key personnel. It's a multi-pronged approach to deep strikes.
Exactly. It shows capability, confidence, and a strategy to hold Russian assets, even far from the border, at risk.
And how does this connect to the broader mood? You mentioned the European context earlier.
Right. If you look at the wider reporting in our sources, there's this growing pessimism in Europe about finding a peaceful resolution anytime soon. The rhetoric is shifting towards escalation being, well, almost seen as unavoidable.
Inevitable was the word used in one source.
Yeah. And when you see Ukraine demonstrating these deep strike capabilities, it kind of feeds into that narrative, unfortunately.
Which brings us neatly to the rhetorical escalation. And who else but Dmitry Medvedev leading the charge there?
He often plays that role, doesn't he? Delivering the really sharp warnings. And this time, he was talking to Europe. He started by saying Russia doesn't want a war with, his words, old and cold Europe.
But there was a but.
A very big but. He immediately followed up by deploying the nuclear threat quite explicitly.
What exactly did he say? The phrasing matters here.
He wrote, and this is pretty stark, that the possibility of a fatal accident is always there, and that the current conflict holds an absolutely real risk of escalating into a full-blown war using weapons of mass destruction.
So, directly linking the battlefield actions, potentially these deep strikes, to the ultimate strategic fear nuclear war.
Precisely. It's connecting the tactical reality with the ultimate threshold.
And this isn't happening in a vacuum. At the same time, there's all this maneuvering around arms control, specifically the New START treaty.
Yeah, the diplomatic chessboard is very active. The Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, he says dialogue needs to start on what happens after START expires. But then he adds this major new condition.
Which is?
That any future talks have to include the nuclear arsenals of the UK and France, not just the US and Russia.
Why bring them in now? It's always been largely bilateral between Moscow and Washington.
Well, the logic seems to be, if we're talking disarmament or limits, we need all the relevant NATO nuclear powers at the table. It forces NATO to engage as a bloc.
Is this also a response to the U.S. wanting to bring China into talks?
Our sources suggest that's part of the framing, yes. Kind of a, if you broaden the scope, so will we move. It adds complexity, creates leverage. Remember, Russia already suspended its participation in the treaty back in February 2023.
Right, so this isn't about active participation now. It's about setting terms for the future.
Exactly. They're dangling the possibility of maybe sticking to the treaty limits for a year after it expires in 2026, but only if Washington makes the same commitment. It's pure negotiation tactics using arms control to talk about the structure of European security and NATO itself.
Okay, so tactical escalation on the ground, rhetorical escalation with nuclear threats, diplomatic maneuvering on arms control, which leads us to potentially the biggest escalation point in these sources, Tomahawks.
The Tomahawk threshold. This feels really significant. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris confirmed that Washington is considering Ukraine's request for these missiles.
And the key difference with Tomahawks compared to, say, HIMARS or even the Neptunes we discussed, it's the range, isn't it?
It's absolutely the range. We're talking about a maximum range of around 2,500 kilometers.
2,500 kilometers.
Yeah.
From Ukraine, that
puts Moscow easily within range. It fundamentally changes the strategic calculus for the Kremlin. Suddenly, their capital is potentially vulnerable to conventional strikes launched from Ukraine.
And this consideration aligns with some pretty blunt language coming from U.S. officials. There was that quote from Keith Kellogg, the U.S. Special Envoy for Ukraine.
Yeah, that was striking. He basically said, use the deep strike capability. There are no more sanctuaries.
No more sanctuaries. That's about as clear a statement of strategic intent as you can get. It directly backs up this idea we started with. The old limits are gone.
It really does. It signals a U.S. endorsement, perhaps even encouragement, of Ukraine taking the fight deeper into Russia.
So how did the Kremlin react publicly to this Tomahawk news? Peskov again.
Yes, Peskov responded. He tried to downplay it initially, calling Tomahawks not a panacea, not a magic weapon that will win the war.
Yeah.
But his very next comments revealed the real concern. He immediately raised two critical questions, as he put it. First, who actually launches the missiles? Would it be Ukrainian soldiers, or would U.S. personnel need to be involved, given the system's complexity?
Okay, operational control.
Sure.
And the second question.
Second, who picks the targets? For these 2,500-kilometer strikes, is it the Ukrainians deciding, or is the U.S. providing the targeting intelligence and data?
And those two questions cut right to the heart of Russia's previously stated red lines, don't they?
Absolutely. President Putin has made it pretty clear in the past that if Western countries provide not just the weapons, but also the targeting data and potentially operational support for deep strikes inside Russia,
then they become direct participants in the war.
Exactly. So any significant U.S. involvement in operating or targeting Tomahawks could be seen by Moscow as crossing that fundamental line.
Which could, theoretically, turn this from a proxy conflict into a direct Russia-NATO confrontation.
That's the fear. And in that scenario, Medvedev's warnings about weapons of mass destruction suddenly shift from maybe rhetorical posturing to something, well, much more realistic feeling, much more dangerous.
So wrapping this up, what this deep dive really shows is these two tracks running in parallel, and both are escalating intensely.
Yeah, you've got the immediate kinetic reality on the ground. These deep strikes erasing physical sanctuaries inside both countries.
And at the same time, you have this strategic, rhetorical, and diplomatic escalation, bringing in long-range weapons like Tomahawks, threatening nuclear use, and maneuvering around global arms control.
The core synthesis seems to be this rapid erosion of the very concept of safety, of a sanctuary. Geographic lines are being blurred by missiles. Rhetorical lines are blurred by these extreme warnings.
It creates an environment where miscalculation seems much more likely.
Dangerously so. The potential for error goes way up, and it seems to guarantee that this period of intense escalation isn't over.
It makes the next few months feel incredibly uncertain and, frankly, quite perilous.
They absolutely are. And maybe the final thought for you, the listener, to chew on is this. If the defining feature right now is the elimination of sanctuaries, what does the potential arrival of 2,500-kilometer range missiles actually mean?
How does it force everyone, not just Russia and Ukraine, but all of Europe, NATO, to completely rethink their offensive and defensive doctrines?
Exactly. When Moscow itself is potentially in range of conventional missiles from Ukraine, how does that reshape military planning, deterrence, and the very idea of security across the entire continent? That's the big strategic question this leaves hanging in the air.